I never came from money. My parents are teachers in Staunton. I got into UVA off a strong GPA, a service scholarship, and a lot of pretending that I belonged. By sophomore year, I knew how to pass. Second-hand clothes that still had the right brands, mimicking the way rich kids joked, knowing when to stay quiet at the wrong kind of party. I just kind of learned how to blend in and pretend like I was one of them. The letter came for me in February. It was a real envelope, a thick cream cardstock, no return address. Inside was a note, handwritten in blue ink. You have been noticed. 3:17 a.m. Rotunda Stairs. Come alone. I thought it was a prank at first. I almost didn't go. I mean, why would anyone invite me to anything like this? But I did. It was cold that night, bone deep. There was no one on the lawn except a campus security car idling near the chapel. I waited on the stairs for maybe 5 minutes before someone stepped out of the shadows. They were tall, older than me, and wearing a long wool coat. He did not introduce himself, just handed me a blindfold and said, "This only happens once." They took me somewhere underground. The walk was long. Must have been through service tunnels or sub-basements. I don't really know because obviously I was blindfolded. They didn't speak the whole way there and I couldn't say. When the blindfold came off, we were in a room lit with green lamps. There were 7 others in there. Students, I think, but no faces I could recognize. The guy in the coat read a statement out loud. About legacy, about trust, about tradition. Not the kind that's performed, but the kind that gets built in rooms that no one is allowed to know about. He talked about shaping institutions, about influence. Then he asked if we accepted the path. No one said no. After that came the silence. We were not allowed to speak for the rest of the night. They took our phones, wallets, everything. Stripped us to our boxers. Gave us identical sweats and hoods. We walked in a line that was single file into another room. That was the first night of testing. The things they made us do weren't about strength, not really. It was about humiliation, pain, and obedience. They made us kneel on frozen tiles for hours. Then, still kneeling, they made us hold books, which were more like massive tomes, really. They were heavy as bricks, and they made us hold them out in front of us, arms locked. Anyone who dropped one got shocked with a cattle prod. I got shocked twice. There were cameras in the corners. I saw them. And microphones, probably. Every now and then a voice would come over a speaker, calm and flat every time. They would be asking someone to confess something, private things, real things. One guy cracked and admitted to plagiarizing a paper. They made him stand naked in front of us for an hour, reciting the honor code over and over while they poured water over him. I threw up in the corner at one point. No one said anything. At the end, they told us that we weren't in. Not yet. This was observation, not selection. If we were chosen, we would know. And if we ever spoke about what we had seen, they'd treat it as rejection. The next few weeks were normal, sort of. Except I'd started noticing them. Guys wearing black gloves in the library. A girl in my econ class who always had a bandage somewhere new on her arm. No one ever acknowledged it, but there was this nod, this look. They knew I'd been through part of it. And then one night, someone slid a key card under my dorm door. Just the card, with a UVA lanyard. No note attached to it. The key card opened a building I'd never been in before. It was a minor administrative facility off Rugby Road that always looked closed. Inside it was cold, clean and empty. There was a metal elevator at the end of the hall that didn't have floor buttons, just a keyhole. The key was already inside. It took me down 6 levels in total. No indicator, just the sensation of descending and the pressure in my ears. When the doors opened up, there were 2 men in masks and surgical gloves. They took my vitals, drew blood, and then asked me to strip and scan me. They didn't speak even once, unless it was necessary. The room had a smell, disinfectant and metal. Then they handed me a folder. Inside was a photo, my high school girlfriend, and a transcript of every message we ever sent. A handwritten page detailing her medical history, her dad's arrest record, her mom's credit score. At the bottom, a line. Influence begins with understanding your own leverage. That was what they told me. I left without saying a word. Next morning, I had a letter waiting under my pillow. It was handwritten. Said I'd been selected. Said I was under evaluation and that I would receive my first assignment sometime soon. It didn't feel like success. It felt like I'd been claimed. The first assignment came just a week later. It was typed and then slid under my door. It had no signature, just a seal pressed into the bottom corner. 2 interlocking rings and a 7-pointed star. It said, "You will accompany Peter L., not gonna give full names that can be traced just in case, to the offices of Dean M., and ensure he receives a recommendation for the Carnegie International Fellowship. Use discretion, do not mention this note." Peter L. was in my poli-sci class. Fraternity kid. Family was oil money. Houston, I think. He barely showed up to class, and when he did, he was hungover and loud. I'd never spoken to him. I didn't know what they expected me to do. You were just supposed to figure it out. They wanted to see how you operated in gray areas. So I watched. I spent 3 days shadowing him without being obvious. He had a weakness for weed and girls. But more importantly, he was stressed, real stress. Hands shaking during tests, whisper arguments on the phone, always glancing over his shoulder. I followed him to an off-campus bar one night. Watched him slip a small envelope to a guy in a parka. The next day, I sent an anonymous tip to the dean's office about him dealing drugs. 2 days later, I got summoned. Same building, same elevator, deeper floor. This time they showed me the video. Peter L. crying in an administrative office, saying it was a mistake, saying he was just trying to help a friend get Adderall for exams, saying he had a problem but didn't deserve to lose his future. They paused the tape. A man in a blazer leaned forward and asked me, "Was that effective?" I said yes. He nodded. "You passed." After that, things escalated. I got assignments once every few weeks. One was intercepting a student journalist story about secret society hazing deaths. Offered him a fake job opportunity with an alumni magazine in exchange for his silence. Another was staging a fight between 2 SGA candidates to tank a campaign. Always subtle, always deniable. If someone traced it back, it could look like coincidence or bad luck or the natural chaos of college life. The next one, they called it a match. Not a party, not a meeting, just match-free. 2 simple words, sent via text from an unlisted number at 9:17 p.m. No instructions and no names. Again, just a location. A derelict fraternity house on Lewis Street. One of those hulking Greek buildings that had supposedly been shuttered after a hazing death my first year. I had never seen anyone go in or out of it before. But that night, the door was open. No music, no lights. Just the faint hum of something electrical in the basement. Inside, it smelled like mildew and bleach. The walls were stripped to bare studs, floors poured concrete. No photos, no banners, no red Solo cups. It didn't really feel like a college space anymore. It felt like a crime scene someone had carefully cleaned. There were people downstairs, maybe 25 or 30 people in total, all of them in black. Suits, hoodies, sweaters, but with faces covered. Plain black masks. No features, no slits for eyes, just matte anonymity. The only way that you could tell them apart was posture, hair, and the way they stood or laughed. The ring wasn't a ring. It was a 12-foot square outlined with faded hazard tape, lit from above with a single, naked construction lamp. There were no chairs. Everyone stood up. No noise except a kind of low, murmuring anticipation, like the crowd at a chess match. A guy with a clipboard stepped into the center and said, "This is match free. No names, no time limits. First one unconscious or unable to continue loses. You know the rules." I didn't know the rules. But no one else reacted. 2 guys stepped into the square. One was lean, twitchy, older. The other was younger, stocky and shirtless despite the cold. They were both barefoot. One had duct tape around his wrists. The other was bleeding from a cut near his eye like he'd fought before. Maybe earlier that night, maybe last week. They didn't touch gloves or give an announcement or a countdown. They just went at each other. It wasn't like boxing or MMA, it was personal. Someone screamed into the other's face before the first punch even landed. The sound of fists hitting flesh was wet and hollow and louder than I expected. I'd never been in a fight before. One guy hit the ground, stood, got kicked in the ribs. Twice. You could hear the air leave his lungs. When he vomited on the concrete, nobody moved. No one tried to stop it. They kept going for nearly 7 minutes. I counted. I couldn't stop myself. Someone behind me murmured, 10-1 on the older guy. Another one whispered, he took down the music school kid last week in under 2. This had clearly been going on for a while, long enough for people to know stats and place bets. Eventually, the younger guy landed a punch that turned the older man's head sharply to the side, and he collapsed, dead white. His head hit the ground with a sound I never want to hear again. It wasn't a thud, it was a crack. He didn't move. People clapped softly. Then the crowd dispersed. They dragged the loser out by his ankles. No one checked if he was okay. I'm not sure what happened to him after that. I just kinda stuck around in the shadows for a while after that, with my heart hammering. I told myself I did not belong here. I'm honestly not even sure why I was told to come here. Like, what was it that I was supposed to see here? I couldn't bring myself to leave though, just in case I was being watched. Just in case leaving would get me into shit. They kept bringing in fighters. I thought it was maybe just a way to blow off steam and maybe hash out personal differences, that there would be a sheet for you to sign up on. Not the case. Some of them definitely wanted to be there, but some of the fighters, you could see the dread in their eyes, sometimes having to be pushed or dragged into the arena. Threatened even. I asked about how people sign up. Just some random group that I didn't know. I just went up to them. I didn't want to sign up myself, but I was curious. They just laughed at me. They told me that if they wanted me to fight, then I would be in there. As I was walking away, they told me to be careful what I wish for. They brought in more fighters throughout the night. I actually recognized someone watching, even through the mask. A girl named Elena G. Honor committee, pre-med, masked, but unmistakable in her posture. She leaned against the support column. She didn't flinch once. I guess this was a normal event for these people. The third fight was the worst. A guy got his nose broken early, blood pouring onto the floor. He slipped on it twice, and people laughed. You could tell he wanted to curl up and die and be anywhere but there. It only got worse from there. Some real psychopaths. Fighting with bats, fighting with knives. I don't want to go into it too much because it really makes me feel sick, but I think I witnessed at least one person die that night. I wouldn't be surprised if it was more than one. The last winner of the night screamed when it ended. Not in triumph, but just screaming over and over like he couldn't stop. No one helped him. They just gave him a white towel and a $100 bill. The worst part wasn't always the assignments. It was the watching. They watched everything. I got pulled aside once. One of the handlers I'd never seen before said my roommate had found a copy of an old assignment I'd left open on my laptop. I said I'd deleted it. He said, you typed a draft in Google Docs. You synced it to the cloud. You didn't delete your history. That's when I realized they weren't just watching just me. They were watching everyone around me. I couldn't tell if they were trying to teach me something or just reminding me I was property now. And slowly, things started happening without explanation. My bank account started growing with small, untraceable deposits. I got an invitation to a consulting internship I never even applied for. The interviewer did not ask a single question, just shook my hand and told me the job was mine. Professors who barely knew me started quoting my papers in class. One invited me to a private research project over the summer. It felt good for a while, but also really wrong, like I'd stepped out of the meritocracy and into something else. Then came what they called the final favor, which, if you don't realize by now, was a fucking lie. Nothing is ever final with these people. Nothing is ever done or finished. I got called in again, this time to a room with 6 other people, all wearing the same black gloves. One of them pulled a file out of a box. Inside was a photo of a girl. Her name was Lydia, and she was a first year. She'd been dating someone connected to a professor on a committee we'd been monitoring. Apparently, she had recorded a conversation, something sensitive. No one told me what it was, but the job was simple. Get the recording. Make sure she stopped asking questions. Do it quietly. I asked what would happen if I didn't. They didn't threaten me. They just handed me another folder, the one with my name on it. Inside were transcripts of my private messages from years back, my search history, audio clips of late-night dorm conversations, emails I didn't remember writing. At the end was a summary of my parents' financial debt, my little sister's school enrollment info, her daily schedule. I took the Lydia job. She didn't have the recording on her, but I got her to delete it. I won't go into details on how. Told her someone was going to use it to tank her boyfriend's scholarship. She cried. I watched her fingers shake as she hit delete. I told her I was sorry before I left. I meant it, but I never looked her in the eyes. I promise I was only instructed to get her to delete it, but I never saw her on campus after that, so I'm not sure what happened. It was Friday night when I was summoned to the 7 Rings. The message was clear and unambiguous. Attendance is mandatory, no exceptions. No location or any mention of time. Just a warning that failure was not an option. The envelope arrived in the mail 2 days later. It was thick cream cardstock like the first letter, but heavier and embossed with a black wax seal. 2 interlocking rings around a 7-pointed star again. I was told to bring nothing but myself and to come alone. The building was an old theater on the far edge of the city, abandoned for years until recently. The marquee flickered faintly. Inside, the air was thick with incense and something metallic, maybe copper and rust. The scent turned my stomach. The seats were gone. The stage was bare except for 7 iron rings, bolted to the floor in a perfect circle, each ring large enough to chain a person's wrists and ankles. There were 7 of them already, bound, with their faces hidden beneath black hoods, silent except for the slow drip of water echoing through the empty hall. A man stepped out from the shadows. His mask was a twisted imitation of a smile, porcelain cracked and stained. He spoke, voice low and chilling. Tonight you witness the final test. The cost of power is blood and fear. Entertainment is control, and control demands sacrifice. They dragged one of the hooded figures to the center of the circle. The crowd, which was about 20 in total, maybe 30 people, in dark suits and black gloves, watched in silence. The figure was stripped to skin. Bruises were all across their torso, old and new. They were shaking, eyes wide beneath the hood. The second figure was forced to kneel beside the first. The ritual began with a ceremony of water and salt. Then came the instruments, long knives, blunt hammers, heated irons. The crowd didn't flinch as the first cuts were made, slow, deliberate and precise. Flesh parted, muscles twitched. The sounds were horrible. Tearing, cracking, a low keening that rose and fell. Every so often, the man with the cracked mask would raise his hand, and the noise would stop. The victims would be questioned in whispers, names, secrets, betrayals. They were promised mercy if they told them what they wanted to know, but no answer was ever the right one. When one broke, they would step forward, pull the hood back, and reveal a face. Sometimes a student, sometimes a professor, sometimes a staff member, always someone who had spoken too loudly, asked too many questions, or refused an assignment. Then they moved to the next. I couldn't look away, even when my hand shook and bile rose in my throat. When it was over, the bodies were dragged off stage, and I mean bodies. The survivors, usually 1 or 2, were given new assignments, new debts and new threats. They were never the same again. As I left, the man in the cracked mask pulled me aside. Remember, he whispered, power is a chain you choose to wear. Break it, and you break yourself. I walked into the cold night, the scream still ringing in my ears, and I knew that there was no way out. I graduated a year later after that one. Top of my class, 6-figure job, DC firm, fast track. They still send me things sometimes, and I still do not say no. It is a lifetime membership, and the only way to cancel is not pleasant. I can share one more time I remember that really stuck out to me. They called it the Scholarship House. The name was a joke. It was an old mansion off Riverview Drive, just outside the city limits. From the street, it looked like a dilapidated relic with boarded up windows, creeping ivy, and a sagging porch that groaned with every gust of wind. Officially, it was temporary housing for visiting fellows or interns, but nobody was ever allowed to stay there. Ever. The invitation came with a warning. No phones, no watches, no cameras, no contact with anyone outside, no exceptions. I was to report at midnight, alone. I wasn't sure what to expect. Inside the air was cold, unnaturally so for early June. The lights were dim low, and the scent of antiseptic mixed with damp wood filled the hallways. They took my phone and wallet at the door without a word, replaced my clothes with a thin cotton robe tied loosely at the waist. I wasn't allowed to keep my shoes. The first hour was silence. I watched for rooms cluttered with dusty trophies, faded portraits of stern men with cold eyes, and heavy velvet drapes that seemed to swallow sound. Then, they called us to the parlor. 7 of us, all in robes, all blindfolded. The door shut behind us. When the blindfolds came off, the room was different. The walls were padded, cream-colored panels stitched tight like an operating room. There were no windows. The only furniture was a circle of chairs, each occupied by a person with their head lowered, eyes closed. A man in a tailored black suit stood in the center, his face obscured by a porcelain mask painted with a cruel smile. Welcome. Here you learn why power is not just possession, but pain. Control is not just influence, but fear. The ritual began. One by one, we were called forward. They made us kneel. A woman stepped forward, carrying a metal tray. On it were surgical tools, scalpels, clamps, needles, a thick coil of braided wire. They told me to remove my robe. The cold air bit at my skin. The woman didn't speak. She clipped a wire to my wrist. Barely a flicker of electricity, just enough to make my fingers twitch involuntarily. The man in the mask circled, speaking of loyalty, sacrifice, and silence. Then the woman reached for my palm. With a slow, practiced motion, she pressed the needle just under the skin. I didn't scream. They made me hold a cold steel bar with the other hand. The wire was threaded through the needle, connecting my body to a small, humming device on the floor. The shocks came next. Not brutal. They were never brutal enough to break me, but they were sharp enough to make my body arch and my breath catch. They told me to repeat a phrase. I belong, I obey, I endure, over and over, until the words blurred. Around me, others moaned softly. When it was over, they blindfolded us again and led us down a narrow corridor to a room with black leather restraints bolted to the walls. Here is where promises are sealed. For hours, I heard screams close enough to make my skin crawl. The next morning, they handed me a photo of a student who had not returned. No name attached to it, just a message. The debt of silence is eternal. They never told me what else happened in that room. I have more experiences somewhere deep in my memory, but that's all I care to recall for now. I'm not in the US anymore. If they can still get to me, then I was fucked no matter what. If they can get me halfway across the world, then it was only a matter of time. I couldn't live like that anymore. Every memory hurts. Every time I think about the past, it stings and drives me crazy. I am not lying here, X. Don't fuck with things you don't know about. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you do and you want to hear more, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and leave a comment down below, as it lets the algorithm know that you like my content and it promotes it to more people. My goal for the channel is to hit 50,000 subscribers, and we're closing in fast, so thank you, and back to the stories. Let me start off by saying this post is real. This isn't made up. I didn't know where else I could share the story to, so I decided to post it here, because I know this is where you post weird creepy shit. So, to set the scene, me and my friends were 10 to 12 when this all happened. One of my friends, we'll call him Leon, told us about a weird campsite in the woods. Apparently, there were claw marks on the trees there and it was really creepy, so we went out to find it. Leon didn't remember exactly where it was, but eventually after maybe 30 minutes of walking, we found it. Obviously, Leon was making shit up and there weren't any claw marks on the trees, but it was still really creepy. There were DVDs everywhere but no DVD player. A shopping cart, a mattress, and a weird bag that smelled horrible. No, it wasn't a corpse. And eventually, we heard footsteps around us when we were all standing still. We heard a couple more, and I knew it wasn't my friends pranking us, since I could not see their feet move around at all. We were already creeped out enough, so we ran out and started climbing up a steep hill to get back to the city. I looked back at the campsite and saw a pair of boots that were not there before. I yelled at my friends something along the lines of, "Guys, go faster." And when we got to the surface, I told them about what I saw. We decided to tell our other friend about this. We'll call him Thea. and we decided to go back in a couple days. The next thing we saw at the campsite terrified me to my core. We walked into the woods at around 4 to 5 p.m., but because it was winter, it got dark really fast, and it took an hour to get to the campsite. So by the time we arrived, it was 6 p.m. and already dark out. It felt like the campsite was in a different place for some reason this time, but we found the campsite eventually. Probably just bad finding skills on our part. After looking through it, we found bottles around the area for some reason that weren't there before. Besides that, we didn't really find anything, so we decided to leave. That is when I looked behind me, and I swear I saw a shadow dash past the bushes. I yelled out, "We need to leave, now." And so we ran up the hill again. My friend grabbed a flashlight out of my pocket, and as a joke, started looking through the forest, yelling something that I don't remember. We looked at a tree next to the campsite and saw the outline of a person staring at us, unresponsive to us noticing him. None of us could make out any details, since, as I said, we could only see his outline behind the tree, and we were already shitting our pants, so we ran as fast as we could out of those woods. The second to last story I will tell is one where we went to the campsite in the morning, instead of at night. There is not really much to say for this one, so I will just jot some things down that we heard/saw. A guy singing, footsteps running and walking around. The thing I saw though was when I was throwing bottles at rocks, 3 to be exact, and once I reached for the third one, it was gone. I looked behind the tree stump that was holding the bottles, and then I heard the sound of glass crashing. I shouted to my friends to fucking run as I ran to the hill again, and we climbed out of there. Also, I forgot to mention, we brought another one of our friends with us that time. The final story is what made us never go back. This was like 5 to 6 months after the events I just listed. It was probably 6 p.m. when we walked in, and it started raining halfway on our way to the campsite. Wanting to record what happened this time, I pulled out my phone and recorded the entire journey on our way to the campsite. I lost the videos to time, since this happened a somewhat long time ago. Nothing really happened most of the trip, besides a putrid smell that was in the air the entire time, and I was slipping a lot. But once we got to the campsite, we were so shocked for like 3 minutes, we just stared at the thing we saw. We saw a deer with its head cut off, its body skinned, and the skin lying on a stump. You might be thinking, it was a wolf or wildlife. The only animals that live in that forest are deer, and it's not like we've never seen a dead deer before. We saw them quite a lot, but they were all either fully skeletons or intact and just dead. Nothing in the forest could have done this to a deer. Anyway, we screamed as loud as we could and sprinted all the way back to our house. And on our way to Theo's house, I swear I saw the outline of a man in the woods staring at us. Cliché, I know, but I swear I saw it. But yeah, that's about it. We were all way too scared to go there again, and I don't even know why we went there again, after what we saw the first 2 times. I got a story from my dad. Be my dad, years ago and still young. Him and his friends pile into a car for a road trip to Virginia. Driving up, high into the mountains/woods, having a really good time. It gets dark and there is a sudden heavy rainstorm. Raining so hard that Dad can't even see the road, let alone see to drive. Drives blind for a while. Eventually sees a bright light up ahead. Dad drives to the light, thinking it was a street light, like a moth to a flame. Parks in front of light, sitting in car, waiting for rain to die down. That's when a humanoid shadow enters the light. Dad and friends are staring in awe of shadow, thinking that Dad crashed the car and they were maybe seeing an angel. They keep looking at the shadow. Rain finally dies down, and they see what it actually is. It's an old man. Dad drove through this old man's yard and parked right in front of his living room window. Dad, friends, and old man stare at each other for a second. Dad backs up the car, cuts 2 donuts in the yard, and floated out of there.